Morning. My name's Kyle Graham. I get the honor of getting with the youth on Wednesday night and sharing with them. We went to youth camp back at the end of June, July. Put together a slideshow. It's a little girl heavy. I don't know why. There's some real good video clips. But we got three girls that want to share what they experienced and what God put on their heart at youth camp. So if you'll give them your time, they want to share a little bit with you.
Hey everyone, so my name is Brawley, and here's my sermon. Have you ever been surrounded by hundreds of people you've never met, yet never felt so at home? That is how I feel every year at church camp. Every teenager is there to find their next step in their walk with Christ. We started each morning with morning worship, did activities with small groups, and had some free time before evening worship. There's no drama, and no one is worried about what they're wearing or where their cell phone was. It feels like you're on a church camp high. The only problem is when you come home, there is drama and mean people and bad influences. Last year, I quickly lost my church camp high after returning home. This year's theme was reconciliation. Our pastor, Tim Harris, said that you cannot set the world on fire till the fire of Christ burns clean through you. My walk with Christ was restored, and I pray every day for God to guide me and keep this fire alive. I hope that every kid gets to experience what I've got to experience at church camp. I hope that everyone in this room can reconcile their relationship with Christ, light the fire in you, and spread the word of Christ. I would like to thank Kyle and Claire for chaperoning our youth and everyone who made it possible for us to attend. Thank you.
My name is Lainey. My experience at camp this year actually began at camp last year. I saw other people experiencing more of God, and while I desired more, I didn't feel like I was ready for more. This year, I went back hoping to find an experience of what I missed out on last year. This year, I realized that I was putting too much value in what I thought other people were thinking about me. Matthew 10:33 says, "Whoever denies me, Jesus, before men, I, Jesus, will also deny him before my Father who is in heaven." At camp, we have these amazing worship services, and there would be teenagers all around me lifting up their hands and experiencing God. While I wanted to, I realized I was scared of what other people would think. Pastor Tim Harris even said, "Don't worry about being embarrassed, worry about being the embarrassment," which means one day we will all stand before God, and I would hate for the life I lived to be an embarrassment to him. Then on the last night of camp, before closing celebration at worship, God spoke to me and said, "Throw them hands up, sis." And I knew right then that I had a decision to make. Was I going to continue to worry about what people around me thought, or submit to God and fully receive the experience and relationship that he had been offering me? So I threw them hands up, and not only did I experience God in a new way, but I can tell it had a positive impact on those around me and hopefully encourage them to be bold as well. I'm so thankful that I went, and I hope that the fire that God has ignited in me and our youth group continues to burn and grow. I encourage each of you that if God tells you to do something, to go and throw them hands up, sis. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Addison, and I've been here at the church for almost 15 years now. So we went to church camp, and like they said, it's an amazing time, and I hope everybody gets to experience that. So since camp last year, God has been working on me and moving me over this last couple of months. What I have realized is that I was fortunate to be raised in church, but just as a baby is dependent on everybody for everything, my Christian walk was also dependent on everybody. I feel like God was telling me to mature, to take my own spiritual growth into my own hands. And while I appreciate everybody that has taught me or poured into me, but it was time for me to stop needing people to read the Bible for me, that it was time to take my own Bible study and do that. Not just attending church on Sunday mornings, but to be active in my youth group. I went from being a student at VBS to teaching and serving kids at VBS. But most recently, I have been called to not just simply attend youth events, but I was called to assemble and lead a team that is currently planning a large youth event called Ignite that was supposed to happen 2 months ago from 2 Sundays ago. Yeah. So I've also learned that when God calls you to do something, it's not always going to be easy. Those of you who have ever tried to host an event have seen the struggles that come with it. Just a month ago, I was at a place of discouragement, telling myself that I just needed to get through church camp, and then I would be back on track. And then while at church camp, our pastor made multiple statements such as, "We need churches on fire. God wants people to burn for him. You will never set the world on fire until the fire of Christ burns clean through you, and the fire." He even used the verse, Luke chapter 12, verse 49, which says, "I have come to bring fire to this earth, and how I wish it was." I didn't know Pastor Tim, and he didn't know me, and he had no idea that God was using him to confirm and encourage me as I continued to lead the team preparing Ignite. As the weekend was, Pastor Tim realized that we all had something special happening to all of us at camp. He described that as, "It's like we were so seen in the Holy Spirit, our flame, and set us all ablaze." Listening to Lainey, I'm realizing that God is growing me every day and using me to inspire, encourage, and grow other people around me. Lainey came to me at the end of camp last year and said she wanted to raise her hand during worship, but she was scared that people would make. To see her and Briley's and the confidence she has gained has made me incredibly proud. Maybe there's somebody today that feels dependent on other people for your own. Let me just encourage you to ask God how he wants, whether it be through your own Bible study, serving in the church, or even supporting our youth group, our youth event on September. Since taking my relationship with the Lord into my own hands, I've seen the amazing things that he can do. And let me just tell you, it was all worth it. If you would like to hear more, just ask any of us to share. Thank you.
Wow. We are so proud of our youth. That is very cool. That's very cool. It's cool to see how God works in the lives of people. I'm assuming it's the same one, but when I let my first little bird fly from the nest when Taylor went to college, she very much wanted to be on her own and get started, but she wanted to maintain her spiritual life, but she wanted to do her own thing. So she wanted to go to her own church. When she tells this testimony, it's funny, but God just kind of hit me with this. But she tells a story that she went to the BCM at Western, and she didn't know anybody. It was like the first weekend there. But she knew that they gave rides to churches, and so she didn't know what church to go to or where. And so she just went, and she said, so I got in a van with strangers. She never recommends getting in a van with strangers, but she got in a van with a group of people that she didn't know, but she knew they were at the BCM. And what's so cool is that they took her to Tim Harris's church, and he was her first pastor away from me. And so the fact that he's working with our kids is pretty cool. He's a good dude. Joseph, message number 7 is where we are this morning. And we're going to land this plane today for a little while because we're getting ready to kick into VBS, and the school's getting ready to start. A little weight on the chest there. So we're getting into that time, but it's an exciting time. When we get into the fall, when we get into this time of the year, when we go back to school, kids come back, and so we have them here for VBS. We're going to transition into our fall programs and on Wednesday nights, and so we like to see things kind of kick in gear, so we're going to transition a little bit. But this is a great place to land this plane. It's a great place to end for a little while. We're going to come back to this, but this is a transition. This morning's message and where we are in Genesis chapter 41 is Joseph's transition. Now, we have followed him. We went back in time, right? We went all the way back to Abraham. We brought it all the way up to Joseph. We've tracked his life. And last week, Josh left you guys with Joseph in prison. And so with all of the things that he has gone through, all of the tough times that he's faced, all of the difficulties, all of the things that he's gone through, he lands in prison. We know that he was placed in somewhat of a leadership role in that, but he's still in jail. He's still in a dungeon. He's still in a tough spot. And so what we want to begin with this morning is, you know where we're going to end, but have you ever been in a place in your life where you've just had to wait for something? When you just get somewhere and it's like, I'm just kind of stuck. It's like I want to do something, but I'm just kind of stuck. I can think of multiple milestones, multiple places in my life where I got to some place and you're just kind of stuck. It's like I'm just kind of here. I'm just kind of doing this. And maybe it's a job. Maybe it's a job that you're not really excited about. Maybe it's a job that's kind of tough. Maybe you're in a place where you're growing up and like you want more responsibility. I can just tell you a lot of young people that I have had come through my classrooms, and they grow up on farms, and they're ready to take over the farm, or they're ready to make the decisions, but they're really not ready to make the decisions, but they think they are. And so they feel kind of stuck, and it's like, well, when am I going to get to do that? When am I going to get to do this? When am I going to be the one that does, how's this going to happen? There's lots of times in our lives that we get to places, and we just kind of feel like we're in a rut, or we're just stuck, or we're just waiting. We're just waiting. And when you're just waiting, it's so hard. And here's the thing. It could be school. It could be in a relationship. It's like I'm just waiting for him to pop the question. It's all this time. I'm waiting for her to say yes to answer my phone call. I'm waiting for this to happen. I'm waiting for something. It could be in school where you're just like, man, I'm just stuck working a job, making, not much money, and I'm going to class and I'm reading all these books and logging on and doing all this stuff, and I just want to be done. I just want to be done. You've been there. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe you made a mistake, and now you're in a pit, or you're in a place, or you're paying something off, and there you are. You're just making one payment after another, and you feel like you're just kind of stuck. In Joseph's case, it was prison. And so last week what we saw is that he had an encounter with the cupbearer to Pharaoh and also the baker. And they both had dreams. They shared those dreams with Joseph, and he knew the meaning. Unfortunately for the baker, it wasn't too pleasant. Okay? It's like, well, it's lights out for you, pal. It's not going to work out. But for the cupbearer, he's like, in 3 days, you're going to be restored. You're going back to work. You're going back to the place of prominence. You're going back, because for him, for the cupbearer, he is right there, okay? To understand, the Pharaoh sits here, and the cupbearer is right here. So all of the lavish life, the cupbearer is experiencing about as close to the Pharaoh as he can. And so now he's transitioned, and he's been thrown in jail because he's fallen out of favor with Pharaoh. And so there he is. And so Joseph's like, look, pal, it's going to work out for you. You're going to be restored. You're going to go back. Now, we don't see a lot. We never see Joseph complain. But in this passage, we see a moment where we realize that Joseph's not particularly thrilled with where he is. Okay, and I want to point that out because it's important, I think, to see this. Because after Joseph had interpreted the cupbearer's dream correctly, he was restored to Pharaoh's court. And Joseph made a request. And if you're not careful, you'll just run right by it. So let's look at it again. Genesis chapter 40, verse 12. This is what it says. This is the interpretation of the dream. This is what it means, Joseph said to him. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position. And you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. You're getting your job back. You're going right back into the golden throne room, pal. You're going right back in there. But here's the request, verse 14, look at it. Hey, when all goes well, remember me. You see it? When all goes well, remember me and show me kindness. Hey, would you mind? Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. There's no mention here of a dream. It's not like, well, we'll wait for Pharaoh to have a dream that I can interpret. It's like, hey, I don't need to be here. I don't really belong here. And so if you don't mind, when you get back in there, could you put in a good word for me to the big guy? Mention me. Let him know I'm here. Listen, I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews. I'm not here on my own. I didn't do anything wrong. And even here, I've done nothing to deserve being put in the dungeon. Could you get me out of here? Listen, I don't deserve this. We get a glimpse of Joseph's struggle. We get a glimpse and what's going on with his heart. But look what happens. Genesis 40:23. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. A moment of transparency. A moment of, hey, man, just, hey, you're going back to the top. You're going to be right there. He's going to be sitting right there. Could you get me out of here? Could you just say, hey, I met this guy in the dungeon. He doesn't deserve to be. I want him to come. But no, he forgot him. And so then we transition over, and we realize how long it was. Genesis chapter 41, verse 1, when 2 full years had passed. Listen, that's not just it's like, oh, I'm sure he's busy. I'm sure he's catching up. I'm sure, whatever. He just forgot today, but tomorrow he'll remember. No. When the seasons pass and you go through years, in Joseph's mind, well, that was over. That's over. That opportunity's passed. It's kind of like trying to flag down an airplane when you're on a deserted island, right? When the plane goes by, you've done all that you can do. When the plane's gone, it's gone. That opportunity passed me by. He's not going to say anything. It's not going to happen. And so this is what can happen to us, because sometimes it's a tough concept. Sometimes it's a hard to swallow pill. For 2 full years. See, here's the hard thing about waiting. The hard thing about waiting is nothing is happening. We want something to happen. We want something. We want an answer. We want yes, no. Here you are. Here's your job. Here's this. Here's that. And we want an answer. But when you're waiting, nothing is happening, and so you're just waiting. And that's why in just these 2 verses is 2 years. You see, the writer of Genesis. We don't. God doesn't say, let's flesh out everything that took place in this 2 years of Joseph. We get details of Joseph's life when God is really active in his life and things are happening. We get no details for this 2 years in prison other than you're just sitting there and getting whatever you get to eat, and that's it. It's just 2 years. 2 years is a long time when you're doing nothing. When you're living life, it goes by quickly. But when you're stuck, when you're in a bind, when you're just there, it goes by pretty slow. And so 2 years pass. Then Pharaoh has a dream. In verse 1 of chapter 41, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile. A great theologian once said that it's hard for God to bless a man greatly unless he has first suffered greatly. And so Joseph has suffered. He's gone through this 2-year period of time. And now, here's the thing. And this is what we have to understand. Now Pharaoh has had a dream. Regardless of what we can see, regardless of what we know, God is always at work. God is always at work. He's always at work in our life, even when we can't see it, even when we don't know. He always uses time to refine our lives. He always uses testing and suffering to refine our lives, to purify our hearts. So if that's where you are this morning, let me encourage you. When nothing is happening, God is working. Always. He's never caught off guard. He never looks around and goes, "Oh, I forgot all about you." That's not God. He never goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to have you waiting 2 years. I meant to get this dream going in Pharaoh's mind, right after the." No, that's not how it works. God's always at work. He's always moving. He's always there. Abraham had to wait for Isaac. What a test. For years. Listen, Moses was 80. He was 80 when God said, "Okay, I got a big job for you. You've been out here herding sheep for 40 years. The first 40 years, Moses thought he was a big deal. He thought he was somebody. And for 40 years, he thought he was nobody. And then when he's 80, God says, "Let me show you what I can do with a nobody. All right? Let's get to work." Noah built a ship on dry ground and waited for it to rain. That's a tough one. Got a boat, guys. Got no water, okay? And so we're waiting. God has allowed his people to wait and wait and wait. But when it happens, it happens. It just happens. In this case, Pharaoh had a dream. He has a dream. And this was the dream. He was standing by the Nile, and when out of the river there came up 7 cows. We're in verse 2 now. They were sleek and fat. Body condition score 7s. And they grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, ugly, gaunt, came up out of the Nile, stood beside the riverbank. And the cows were ugly and gaunt, and they ate up the 7 fat cows. And then Pharaoh woke up. What was that about? He fell asleep again, had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy full heads, and then Pharaoh woke up in another dream. In the morning, he was so tore up, he was so troubled that he sent for all of his magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. Now listen, this is interpretive magician, but these guys are not doing card tricks and pulling rabbits out of their hats. Okay, these are the wisest people that he has. These are the smartest guys that he's got. These are the ones who design things and build things and engineers. And I mean, everybody that he has that has any kind of sense at all, this is who he brings in. And all of the wisdom of Egypt has no idea. We got nothing for you. Okay? We got nothing for you. And then, after 2 years, and now Pharaoh is troubled by this dream, all of a sudden, and I think it was probably because he didn't want to bring it up, because it was a bad moment in his life, especially when he saw what happened to the baker. It's like, this could go really bad, okay? Really, really bad. The chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, you know, I'm reminded of my shortcomings. He doesn't say I'm reminded of a friend. He doesn't say I'm reminded of a guy that I met. He says, I'm reminded of a problem that you and I had that wound up getting me in trouble. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and you kind of threw me in jail. He imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. We're not going to get into details. But there was a Hebrew there with us. He was a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out, listen, I'm going to tell you, it turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled. You remember? You did that. So there's this guy. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph. He was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. I think that's interesting. It's a little bit in there. It's like if you're stuck waiting for 2 years, there comes a time when you need to take a bath, clean yourself up, all right, and stand up and go. And so he called for him, and so he cleans himself up, and he shows up in the presence of Pharaoh. Isn't that amazing? How do you respond when you have opportunity? How do you respond when an opportunity comes to you? How do you respond when given a compliment? You know, I really appreciate positive feedback. It's one of those things that's, I do a devotion every year for the teachers conference that I go to. We were there a couple of weeks ago, and I'm always humbled because these guys are from all over the state, and I only speak for about 10 minutes. But for the rest of that week, I run into people, and they're like, "Hey, I appreciate your comments yesterday. I appreciate your comments this morning." And I'm always humbled by that, because if I have a moment enough, my response is always going to be, "Listen, it ain't me." Okay, that doesn't come from me. I've got nothing. If you showed up to listen to what Greg has to say, stay home. Okay, there's more cool stuff on TV or wherever else you want to turn. But what I have is what God gives me, and that's worth something. And I'm humbled by the fact that He uses me that way. I'm so humbled by the fact that He does it. And I think when I look at this, when I see Joseph's response to Pharaoh, this is what he says in verse 15. He says, "I had a dream and nobody can interpret it. But I've heard it said that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." Look at his response. "Nope, it's not me." Now, you have to understand that in the culture of Egypt, Pharaoh is up here at the God level to those people. Okay? This is a moment. Okay? This is a moment. Pharaoh's like, "Look, I've talked to all the smart guys I've got, and I'm Pharaoh. I'm up here. And so I'm being told that you can do this." And his response is, "I cannot. I cannot do it." And you had to know that in that moment of those words coming out of his mouth, in that moment that Joseph is looking at the greatest, most powerful man in the land, that he looks him in the eye and says, "No, I cannot." That he has to go, "What are you talking about?" I mean, he could have done whatever. He could have given credit wherever he wanted to give credit. Pharaoh didn't care. He just wants his dream interpreted. But Joseph says, "I cannot. But God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. I work for somebody bigger than you. That's a pretty bold statement for a guy who's been in the dungeon for 2 years. Okay? For a guy who's been in the dungeon for 2 years, that's a pretty bold statement. He could have said a lot of things about a lot of people. So then we get the dream. Pharaoh said to Joseph, okay, this is what happened. In my dream, I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when out of the river there come 7 cows, fat and sleek, that grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows came up. They're scrawny, ugly, pitiful-looking things. I've never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. I don't know where these things come from. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before. And then I woke up. And then, in my dream, I saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin, scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads, and I told this to the magicians. They don't have any idea what I'm talking about. They got nothing. But none of them could explain it to me. Pharaoh had called on everybody that he had, the best that he had, and Joseph had declared that God was greater. God is greater than them. God is greater than me. God is greater than you. And so whatever he tells me is the truth, and that's what you're going to get. And now he interprets the dream. Pharaoh's like, that's what I got. That's what I saw. What is it? And Joseph says to Pharaoh, verse 25, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh. You see this? It's not, this is what I'm telling you. This is coming from me. He says, this is what God is revealing to you. God is revealing this to you in your dream. And I'm just here to tell you what God is doing. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. Listen, the 7 good cows are 7 years. And the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It's one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterward are 7 years. And so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. There's 7 years of famine, Pharaoh. You know what that means. You know what it means. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt. It's bumper crop. It's bin busting, okay? It's good yields. It's everything that we need. It's the rain we need. It's the water we need. It's the crops we need. No pests, no bad things are going to happen. For 7 years, good times. But 7 years of famine will follow them. And then all of the abundance of Egypt will be forgotten. And the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God was going to do it. So he didn't just tell you once, he's told you twice. And that's why you're troubled, and that's why I'm here. That's why you're looking for answers. Now, I think it's interesting. I want to take just a second here and point out what Joseph is about to say and how bold that is. Pharaoh asked him to interpret the dream. He didn't ask for advice. He's Pharaoh. He runs the place. He just wanted to know what it meant. This is Joseph following God's lead. Because what Joseph is about to do is give advice to the ruler of the land of Egypt. He's outside the bounds of interpreting the dream. Notice this. He's advising Pharaoh on what to do with this dream. And he says, now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Now, you notice how he does this. He could have said, I got just the guy. This is what you need to do. You need to put me in charge of it. He doesn't refer to himself. He just says, this is what I got for you. Let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used for the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. That's why we have grain bins. That's why we do what we do. That's why we have freezers. That's why we have the space and the capacity that we do now, instead of just living off of it when it's good. So he just puts the plan out there. Joseph just puts it out there. Pharaoh liked it. Verse 37, the plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. Sounds like a good idea. So Pharaoh asked all the guys, can we find anyone like this man? Y'all got any ideas? One in whom is the Spirit of God. Joseph didn't even raise his hand. He never referred to himself. He just did what? He waited. Somehow waiting in prison for 2 years teaches you to be slow. It teaches you to wait on God. In this moment, he's looking around and going, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe, after 2 years, I gave up on this guy, this cupbearer guy, that he would never even, and now what I was asking for, God has given, he has granted, he just did it on his schedule. So I'm just going to give a little suggestion here and see what happens. We'll see what God does next. So Pharaoh says to Joseph, well, since God has made all this known to you, guess what? Ain't nobody as sharp as you are. No one is so discerning and wise as you. You're going to be in charge of my palace. And all my people are to submit to your orders. Are you kidding me? These people have been there for years. This guy just came out of prison. He just came out of prison. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I'm putting you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. And then it's crazy. He takes his ring off. I mean, the ring is the stamp. The ring, when the cupbearer was executed, it's the ring. Put him to death. Sealed it. Life and death in the land of Egypt in that ring. And in just a matter of moments, he pulls it off and gives it to Joseph. He dressed him in robes of fine linen, put a gold chain around his neck, had him ride in a chariot as his second in command. He's the prime minister of Egypt today. And the people shouted before him, make way! And he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Talk about a turn of events. 1 minute you're waiting in prison. 1 minute it's like, I don't know when this is ever going to happen. I don't know when this is going to happen. I've been here forever. It's going to go on forever. It's not going to happen. He's not listening. He's not here. He doesn't care. And then all of this transpires. When God gets moving, he moves. He moves. What do we take from this? How do you apply this? How do you take this and put this to work in your own life? Well, let's turn the tables for a moment. Because any of us could be in this same situation. When this guy comes riding out of Pharaoh's throne room as his second command in a chariot, how about the blue-collar guy that's out there making bricks in Egypt looking up and going, who's that guy? Yeah, he just got out of prison, and now he's running the country. What are you, kidding? And I'm supposed to bow to him? Where did he get his education? Who is he? Who made him, what's Pharaoh thinking? He's lost his mind. He's crazy. How would you respond? How have you responded? It's happened. You've seen that. You've seen other people that all of a sudden God has said, we're going to put them in this position, they're going to do this, and you're looking at them going, that's the nuttiest thing I've ever seen. How have you responded to that? Because it happens. We don't know what God's doing in their life. We only know what he's doing in our life. Remember this. God's timetable for someone else is not your timetable. It's not your timetable. It's his. It's theirs. And we don't have all the answers. So this is what we take from this. 2 walking points. During the waiting period, trust God without panic. Trust God without panic. Count on him to handle the cupbearers in your life. Those people that you count on that you couldn't count on. Those people who say, hey, give me a hand here. Hey, remember me. Hey, trust him to handle them. He will. The people who forget you. The people who walk out on you. The people who don't show up when they said they would. The people who break their promises. Let him deal with that. It's God's job to deal with the cupbearers of your past. It's your job to be the kind of servant that he has designed you to be. And be faithful. Be faithful in the waiting periods of life. Remember, God will not forget you. He will not forsake you. Number 2 is this. when the reward comes, thank God without pride. Thank God without pride. Nothing that I have, nothing that I do. The fact that I stand before you every Sunday morning to bring His Word is humbling to me every week. It has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with the gifts He's given me and the abilities that He puts in me, and if He takes it away from me, I'm nothing. It's all Him, it's not me. Only God can reward you for your faithfulness. If He has, be grateful, not proud. There will always be somebody who will find a reason to say that you're not deserving of what it is that you have, that you're not qualified for the reward, or you're not qualified for a promotion. But always remember, and remember with humility, it is God who always puts you where you are. Nobody is anywhere unless it's His hand. Listen, the God of Joseph is still here. He will stand beside us during our dungeon days, and He will be there. Read His Word, and let Him remind you of His promises. I will never leave you. I have prepared a place for you. I will come again and take you home. Are you prepared when He calls for you? You know, that's the ultimate end of our waiting, is to go home with Him. We don't know when our time is, but we need to be ready for that. And so ultimately we put our trust and our faith in Him, and then we do what He's called us to do. And if you're here this morning and you've never said yes to that kind of a relationship, you are struggling. And I would just challenge you, don't struggle anymore. Give it to Him. Give it to Him. He knows what He's doing, and He's working, and He's active, and it's happening, even when we can't see it. Let me pray for you. Father, we thank you so much. Father, as we have examined this life of Joseph, and now he has taken control of the whole land of Egypt, Father, we have watched his story from the pits of his brothers making, to the accusations, to his years of waiting in a dungeon. But he was faithful through all of that because he had a relationship with you. Father, maybe there's someone here this morning that does not have that relationship. Father, I pray before it's everlasting too late that today changes that. You never leave us. You never forsake us. You're always there. You're always working in the background. Father, we just pray that we would come this morning faithful, that we would be found faithful, putting ourselves behind and letting your light shine in us. Father, if there's someone here this morning that needs to respond in a way that, Father, however it is, whatever they need to do, however we need to respond, however we need to reflect on this, Father, just give us that moment. We place this time in your hands, Father. You guide it. You lead it. We ask it, Father, humbly, and we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. Would you please stand?